it's because comedies are about new life, about reunion, union. This play, Twelfth Night, starts with loss. Two twins are separated, each thinking the other has lost at sea. So the play begins with lost and ends with found.
Yeah. I'm now a host of the Director's Notes.
You are a host. You can put that on your resume now.
I am adding this to my resume. Like, welcome. And
that's right.
This camera.
Go for it.
Welcome to the Director's Notes. My name, actually, no, I'm not saying my name.
I'll say your name. This is Lydie Dubuisson, who is our assistant director on Twelfth Night and is a Langamite, part of the Langamite Directors Program. And I met Lydie last year on Zoom when she was consulting on Les Berceurs.
Who would have known?
I think I had COVID then, right?
Yes.
Yes. And I was thrilled when Lydie agreed to join us on this production. She's a director based in Montreal. And she just finished The Diggers. You did play that went out to Winnipeg as well. We are very, very blessed to have her on board this ship.
Well, I'm happy to be your host and to interview Seana McKenna, who is the amazing director of Twelfth Night. I have the privilege of being her assistant on Twelfth Night, and I wouldn't have wanted to rediscover Shakespeare with anyone else. Really, I was so thrilled, and I am even more grateful now that I've observed the process with you. And you took me along with on this journey. It was amazing. It's still amazing. We still have
a few waves to crash,
but it's going so well. I'm loving it so much. She's an amazing director. Hi, Seana.
Hi, Lydie.
How are you doing?
Okay.
So exciting. I've missed you so much since yesterday.
Since yesterday at 9 p.m.
Yes.
We last saw each other.
We had a wonderful dress rehearsal.
First dress. Yes.
Apparently, next week, there's something called the first preview.
Is it next week?
I keep trying not to say it, but apparently it is next week.
Yes. That'll be good. I think we need an audience. I think because that's the missing element at the moment.
You're totally right. That is and actually yesterday we had a few in the audience.
Yeah, we did. And our second dress will have about 60, I think, people coming in.
Do you spy on the audience?
Do I spy on the audience? You mean, do I look and say, how did they respond? Are they responding? Are they there? Well, right now I don't, because I'm focused mostly on what's happening on stage.
So am I.
But I think no, you're not. You're looking, going,
a little bit, but I'm doing both.
Yes, I think you do. Especially if you think something's very funny and then you look and people are going, then you might be curious. But or when someone laughs at something that you think is funny, then you go, well, I'd like to talk to that person. We have the same sense of humor. I think that's part of being in an audience. I mean, comedies are better with full houses, I think, because it's sometimes intimidating to laugh alone. You don't want to draw attention to yourself, but I think it's with comedies you like to be packed in, and because laughter is infectious.
Absolutely. And that's strange because it's kind of like there's a protocol about being quiet if you're in the audience, but then when you make the noises that gather us together, that's also incredibly healing as an audience, but also for the cast to hear that reaction coming.
Yes.
Like you said, like we actually come out of a show saying like, what a great audience.
Yes.
They were so responsive.
Yes.
They were so...
because the energy, they feed you.
Mm-hmm.
Their energy feeds you. And it's a cyclical, the more, it's like from Romeo and Juliet, the more I give, the more I have, for both are infinite. It's a circle,
I love how you get to quote Shakespeare stuff like that. Can you tell us about that journey, about exactly how you, because the script in you have a history with the script of Twelfth Night.
Yes.
I could give away some parts of that story, but how about you lay it out for us?
Yes, I know the play.
Do you?
Well, I've seen many, many, many productions as well, and I have been into at the festival.
Yes, you
The
have.
first one I was in 1985 on the festival stage, and the last one was, I don't remember, but I was the oldest Olivia in Christendom, I think, 2000 and something. And so I do have those productions vaguely in my memory. Some things I remember more clearly, like hearing certain actors. The first time you're in a play, I think you, and also you listen to, the first time I did Twelfth Night, we took it on tour as well to the States. So we did King Lear and Twelfth Night in rep. So I would hear this play every night on the tannoy, you know, the speakers that come into the theater in backstage in the dressing room. So I was very familiar even then with the play, and we did it for a year. I think we had a T-shirt for Lear that said "Lear for a year," and on the back it said, "The wonder is we have endured so long." But so yes, I have had
If anyone
a
has
long
that
history
T-shirt, I will buy it from you. I
It's
want
probably in a
that.
closet somewhere.
Someone.
But yes, so I do know the play, but it's so different. Every production, of course, that you see is so different because it's a different time right now. Like doing this play in 1985 is
Yep.
different than doing it right now. And you have different casts and different designers and different directors. So, and Shakespeare stands up to the test of time, I think.
That was probably the first thing that I did when I found out that I was going to work with you. I thought I right away, because first of all, Langham program, you work with Seana McKenna. Yay! On the Shakespeare. Hey, Seana McKenna, Shakespeare, and looking up at everything that you've ever worked on. And as soon as I saw 1985 version, like that you were the Viola in
Yes.
Shakespeare in the 12th Night, I went and I watched it and I was like, everybody in the room, come. This is the director I'm going to work with. This is Seana. But it's just so amazing to see exactly like in 1985, it was already a statement still happening after all these years. 2024, we're revisiting it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still, it feels like whatever hand takes the work, it changes. Mm-hmm. It can't be the same. And even if you would do it again in a few years, it would change because you are no longer the same person as you are in 2024.
Yes, and I've worked with young actors as well at the National Theatre School and the Birmingham Conservatory. And it changes. It changes. I mean, there's some things I think that are the same. I mean, you know, probably my interpretation of certain characters, but also when you're working with a cast like we have in this production, you have to say they're extraordinary, a group of artists. So you have to say, what is your interpretation? What are you trying to say with this character? And they bring it. So you have to continue to play with that and to open up the conversation. So that's going to shift. I mean, you know, actors are making choices I never would have dreamed of. But I say, yes, let's do that. It's much greater. The whole is always much greater than the individual.
Did it change? Did the visual that you had in mind, let's say last fall, to now what we're creating and what we're still crafting?
Oh, yes, it shifted. It shifted. Of course it has. I mean, we had to change designs because of, you know, for many reasons, many of them financial, and because, you know, the theaters have not come back and grants from government grants are gone because the ones that were helping people and theaters, small theaters and large theaters, recover from the pandemic. So yes, we have to make alterations and changes, but you go, this is what it is. We can still do this play because we have this extraordinary script, this fabulous cast, this dream team, creative team, you know, so.
Actually, very amazing creative team. Mm-hmm. Can I ask if it's a coincidence that it is such a powerhouse of fantastic women professional of the arts?
It's women in the theater, yes.
Because we are, and women in the theater means all of the sounds.
All the sounds, the sounds of babies in rehearsals. Yes, let's include that. We you know, this is what we do in our lives.
We bring life, right?
Life.
But we really have a room. Like, how many times have I looked around the table and I'm like, it's all women.
It's all women.
Sound
Paul
designer,
Shilton
light designer.
is our women.
Sound
Paul
designer,
Shilton
light designer.
is our composer, and of course on the soundboard with Verne we have Scotty, and
Yes.
there's, but yes, the actual designers are women.
Is that a coincidence? If I may ask.
I just like who I like, and I'm enjoying it. Our stage managers are all women. I mean, I do think there's a certain ease in discussions. I think there's certain no problems if the children are crying or whatever. Not having had this large a creative team before,
It is a big machine.
yes.
It is a
I
big.
mean, Christina Poddubiuk and Bonnie Beecher and
Very good.
Verne, good, and Paul, our composer, and sound designer, Verne. So but they've all got great ideas, and so you welcome them, whatever gender they are.
Because it's 12th Night, and it's all about the love of the love of the love.
Yeah.
If you love your work as designers, if you love each other as the characters
Well,
of the
it's
play.
interesting because it looked like everybody was having a ball, and I think that's important. That actors seem to be having a good time, even if maybe they're not. They seem to be having a good time. And that in itself puts you at ease because you don't feel discomfort. You don't feel that the actors are not having a good time or they're uncomfortable. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between a good actor and an actor having a good time.
And that's important. Like for me personally, I know I like something when I want to be the actor on stage, when I
Yes.
want to feel their joy, and
Yes.
I wish I was them because they're looking like they're having
And with
such a
comedies,
blast.
you do want to walk off with the people off stage.
Yes.
So, oh, that would be great because it's because comedies are about new life, about reunion, union. This play, Twelfth Night, starts with loss. Two twins are separated, each thinking the other has lost at sea. So the play begins with lost and ends with found.
Yeah.
Right? And there's death, there's grief at the beginning of this play, and excessive shows of grief. Olivia wants to, wrap herself in a chrysalis of grief for 7 years. For many reasons, but both Viola and Olivia, whose names are very almost anagrams, have lost their father.
Yeah.
And Viola thinks her brother, and Olivia has lost her father and her brother. So these are women unmoored from the male authority figures in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Not much mention of mothers, as often there isn't, except that Sebastian says, I am so much like my mother in his vulnerability and emotional responses to things. So already the gender stereotypes are being defied in this play.
Yeah.
And there's Viola, who's going out into the world dressed as a male, but experiences the liberty of saying what she thinks. She's direct, she's intelligent, she has a certain liberty, which she, I would say, thrives in, but she's not like Rosalind, where Rosalind has all the aces in her hand. Viola is pining in thought. One of the themes of the unrequited love. She loves Orsino and he loves another. And Orsino loves Olivia, he thinks, but she loves another.
Isn't that a rock song from the 80s?
Yes. Yeah.
But,
so in about this play, I think I guess most aligned with Northrop Frye, who believes that the life force will out. When the Puritans say no drinking, no singing, Sir Toby says, because thou art virtuous,
there shall be no more ale.
There shall be no cakes and ale. That's a misquote, but it's basically we can't party because you don't like it. So this oppression that the revelers are trying to explode, but they're also chaotic and they're excessive. So there's imbalance in the play.
Yep.
And I think the play is actually moving towards a balance and leaning in towards joy, which is probably why 67 appealed to me, 1967.
Oh, you stole the question from me. It was kind of like,
I
why
could read your
1960s?
mind.
Yes, you can. You can. We are in sync now. But yes, 1967.
Yeah.
Why? I know why, but let's just talk about why.
Well, because I was thinking of a time where I felt that there was a blooming or a burst of life in what had been even though there were horrific wars going on, the Vietnam War, the Biafran War, the famine, the 6-Day War, as you know, there are wars going on right now, but we are looking for something to make us feel better about the world and in the situation that we are in. And to me, even though those things were going on in 67, for me it seemed, I was a kid then, but it seemed like a time of optimism, of possibilities, that there was change, that the constrictions of the 50s, which is what I feel Olivia is in her household, her father's household, and really has denied her youth. She wants to seclude herself from the world for 7 years. She's a young woman. That's kind of her whole youth. Is she's going to enforce, almost, she's banishing herself to a nunnery. Yeah. And I don't know how much Shakespeare, whether he thought that was good advice. It certainly didn't seem so in many of his plays.
No, it seems to be some sort of a punishment. But...
Yeah. So it was about that life force and that time of change for the better, that there was a will to change. It was also a younger generation that is coming forth. And I think in our play we have generational differences as well. There are people who are still back, into the early 60s and 50s, and there are people who are springing forth. More matter for a May morning, says Fabian. And, we in Canada, we had one of the world's last great world fairs with Expo 67 at Montreal. And
we still talk about it.
And it was a time of, it was before there was a man on the moon, so we still had mystery about that, and it was positive. And then came 68 and 69. Things but for a moment, and the play begins with, the first word is if. The second word is music. And then I think the 13th word is excess. But, it begins with if.
I like the relationship between how 1967 seems to have been an era of new options possible, like new ways of decisions taken in 67 could long-term change things, could actually bring actual change for women, for civil rights, for the Afro descent, for a lot of people who for a long time, for centuries, had felt like these things are not going to change.
We have no voice.
Suddenly there was a new option. And with 12th Night, what you have is exactly what you mentioned, those two women who don't have the weight of, like in many Shakespeare's, the father tells you this is who you're going to marry, you have a blockage to love, therefore now the youth has to find a way to go around that decision. And both those two women don't have a voice telling them who they're going to marry, and now they get to have options. Like that's what I find beautiful, is to have Olivia in 1967 of like, look, you could stay indoor, but there's a world out there that is in color, that is
in color,
bustling with living color, and the music is funky and fun, but if you want, you can stay indoors with your blind shuts and let it pass by you.
Yes, let it pass by. And I think that's what Feste is trying to do in the play.
Yes.
He's saying, wake up. Time doesn't stop for anybody. The whirligig of time doesn't stop. So seize your life. Seize your moment.
And I can
one
hear
could say
right now,
carpe diem, of course, but it is about time. Time is another character in this play. Time passes and it won't stop with or without you. So
what you choose to do with those next 7 years, make sure you know, or make sure that it's what you want, at least, because they don't have that voice who's going to make that decision for them.
No.
So for Viola, she gets to decide, clean slate. And I'm still like, Viola, long term, what was your plan?
Yes.
Are we staying
and
there's
still ideas of hierarchy, but they're also topsy-turvy in this play, about marrying below your degree, above your degree. Malvolio, who is a woman in our play, as is Feste, are longing, yearning for the attentions of Olivia, but also the power that brings, the status that brings. So they're aching for these things. And there's a possibility of change. I mean, Twelfth Night was a celebration, it was a celebration of
New Year,
upheaval. change the barriers in society. The Lord of Misrule becomes Lord for a day, and anybody can be that person, and they make the decisions. So it's this wonderful kind of revolution before you get back to day-to-day life. So there is this constant order, disorder, excess, moderation. And that you can't control love. The madness of love, the folly, the wisdom that you should, observe decorum and not be the wooer. Olivia's constantly struggling with this.
Yeah.
And then she says, I can't do it. I want him. I'm going after him. I'm pursuing him. I'm the wooer. So she herself breaks that boundary.
As soon as she asks, what is your parentage?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I need.
That's all I need to know. Because she's a countess. She does have certain expectations, I suppose, for lineage, for whatever.
Can't wait for the teenagers who feel like they know Shakespeare. I can't wait to see how they're going to receive this play, because it's very interesting how we often think like, old story does not. I don't feel any connection. I'm not connected to that story, and then you sit and you watch and you're like, I absolutely understand or identify with multiple characters, all the characters. It's very interesting, and I feel like Twelfth Night is a beautiful challenge to understanding how Shakespeare was thinking of women back in the day, and to see like, if you read those words, it feels like it's the same conversation. Like they have feelings. Like the conversation between Viola and Cesario actually, and Duke Corsina, where it's like, men love this way and women love, and yet
and
Viola,
she says,
there's an answer there, but that's William writing that.
Yes,
and I like that idea of like, see, even in those years. He knew, and he wrote those characters and these women who could have used more space. But I feel like Twelfth Night is one of those clues, one of those little gems that let us know, like, no, I feel like there are things that y'all would like to tell us.
Yes.
And a lot is on paper. So it's nice to discover that it's one of those plays that we actually have a voice in that play. Women speak, and it may have been written by William Shakespeare and by a man, but that man gave voice to a lot of emotions that young women feel, whether it's Olivia, Viola, and all the different generations. Mariah also, like you have a lot of different aspirations to love, different ways of emancipations, but you also have the reality of the system that you're in. Like Mariah, you marry the man that you supported and that you push and that you take care and you cradle, and then you have Viola, like, well, I will stay behind him, but I will love you and I will do the sacrificial love. It's all those different, and you have then Olivia, who's like, no, gimme. Gimme.
I want this.
Just be what I want.
I trust in fate, but fate, make it the way I want it to be.
But they're all women's stories, and I find that very interesting. And you placing it in 1967, I feel like it's just a gift to the audience of like, because it could have been 2024.
Oh yeah, it could be.
It really could have.
I think anytime. I mean, I've done it in I think it was the Musketeer period, Cavaliers with swords, and I've done it in set in Raj, India. So it's been very, very different settings.
No, I could carry it to the Caribbeans in a second. I'd love to.
And it has been, nothing is new. It's all been done, really. I mean, and all over the world, when you think of the number of productions that Twelfth Night, has had. But it's great that it can be in so many theaters across the world.
It resonates. It's just, it's a beautiful story. And if I may ask, because we started to touch it a little bit, but I want to talk about the joy of why do we do this? Because it's a lot of work, Shauna. It's a lot.
Yes, but there's stability, fame, and money. We laugh.
That's why we do theater.
Yeah, that's why I do theater. That's right. Because it's live. That's why.
No, it's live, definitely. But I am very impressed in how, like, the energy that we put. I took my last sweet time to really dive into theater full time. I worked in the healthcare center for a long time. And a lot of times I compare, like, the pressure of the work. And I'm not saying that, but no, yes, we are changing lives differently. But the energy that we put towards surgeries and the energy that we put towards making it to our texts and to making it to deliver to the audience the storytelling. I think it was to you that I said I never heard the song "The Surgery Must Go On." Nobody wrote that song, but we actually have a song that says "Show must go on." We're going to keep on moving forward. Like we look at the budget, we move forward. We look at our and
sometimes it doesn't. The show doesn't go on.
Yeah, sometimes it just goes like, oh.
Or sometimes it stops mid-performance because either, you're being...
It can happen.
They're having an unruly crowd that you have to stop. And Scott Wentworth and I did that. Was in Montreal. We had to stop Antony and Cleopatra because we had a group of young boys who wouldn't stop.
Oh, wow.
The show eventually went on. And also, when you have somebody, you can tell someone in the audience is having difficulty or there's an illness, and you say, oh, we're going to stop the show right now. Mm-hmm. So I think the show does stop.
And when we interrupt, it is a huge deal. It is a huge deal to we're going to stop the show right now. Please hold a minute. Like everybody's like, the end.
I don't feel that way anymore. I think I used to. I think life is more important than, that person having trouble breathing there is more important than me continuing this speech. You have more control if it's a one-person show that you say, we're just going to stop now and can we have some help? Because this isn't surgery. It is a play.
Right.
As much as we devote ourselves to it and there are the time constraints and the pressures, but it is a play and it's for this audience. But I think I would say surgeries must go on. And please
somebody please write that song. It's needed.
Well, talk to people who are waiting for surgeries, I mean, yes, please, let's go, and the pandemic. I mean, I think we've all taken different looks at the world and life since it sort of was on hiatus. But it was still going. Nature was still going. Talk to all the people who went for walks to get some kind of calm and perspective,
my kids kept on growing and they kept changing.
My kids kept going. Grandchild kept going.
It was what it was. And I feel like eventually we will have to pay attention to these stories and how we are digesting what we entered in 2020. Because like you said, I'm not sure if it's... Where are we at with what started in 2020?
Yes, and what all the repercussions of that, all the repercussions that we're in now with, instability and inflation and rent and housing, all those things, I think. And that's, I think we need a comedy. I think we need to remember what is good about living and what is good about being like, I'm grateful I'm here, still breathing and talking to you.
And please keep on.
And this is something to acknowledge. And,
Yeah. Because it was interesting. I think we all question our lives on in March 2020, we were all like, is this when it's over or are we ever? And then I was like, no, I mean, theater outdoors, haha, that's how it started. We're never leaving.
Well, yes. I mean, here we had one theater operating the first year of pandemic. That was Here for Now Theater, outside. People gathering in 20 chairs outside. That was the only thing that was actually going on the first year, 2020.
But the importance of talking to each other and sharing stories. Of course, we all turn to our phones and our social media, but I felt for me, it just made me more hungry for when was I going to be in a room again.
Yes, and because everybody brings their own story into the theater, right? So they're going to connect to different things. It's so subjective. Yeah. What if somebody has just lost their brother and they go, I lost my brother?
Yeah.
I mean, so they're responding to something in a very different way. Or somebody who knew somebody who drowned. There's lots of things in the play that you connect with that are secret, that nobody maybe knows.
Different elements of the play that awaken different elements in different people. And even for our actors.
That's right.
That's one of the things that I appreciate with Stratford is the multi-generational, how the casting is so diverse. And they're all sharing different experiences and different stages of their lives. And of course, casting, it goes with like that kind of vibe where you're at. Like if you're still in your 20s, well, you probably won't be cast in, well, I guess some people would. I don't think that Stratford does that. But you get to age cast people in a way that your mother actually has a lot of life experience.
Yes.
Your Sir Toby can actually have eyes that is sharing like a whole world and a whole life, and that they get to infuse that into their characters.
Yes. And they also, there's mentorship as well as built into this Stratford Festival. When I was doing Romeo and Juliet, I was so thankful for Trish Connolly. She saved my life. I was in her dressing room crying more than I was crying on stage, I think. But she was a nurturer. She helped me through. And you feel, as an actor, having gone through that it's your duty, if you can, to pass that on.
Right.
To say, and I think that, in a way, to me, is the extension from my acting and mentorship to directing, is to try and enable actors, because it's tricky stuff. Shakespeare's, and things that have been passed on to me from Trish and Douglas Campbell and Brian Bedford and Nicki Pennell, and I remember them, I hear them, and the directors I've worked with. So it's actually an oral history.
It is.
And it's passed on through the doing and the practice and the storytelling,
Being in the room is, especially during that process, I wonder if the audience has any idea of how rich this space is of stories. And like you said, like it's true that there's oral passing on, like it's oral history that is passed on from one to another. Like how many times Scott Wentworth and yourself exchanged, like, remember when we did that production of, and that story of 35 seconds just fed 15 artists around y'all of just examples of things that can happen on stage, example of emotions that are felt, in examples of communication and impact that it had on. And we learned from, like, there's no way Vanessa Sears is not impacted by everything, of every note and every memory that you share every now and then. So that's beautiful to see that theater. It's not only the passing on when we're on stage, but it's also the whole process.
And I think it's because when you talked about family earlier and communal, I think there is also, Stratford has a long tradition.
Absolutely.
It's one of the oldest theaters in Canada that's still here under the same, basically the same name. And as freelancers, we're all freelancers. We move from theater to theater constantly. There feels like there is something that people have stood on the same boards in the same theater decades and decades ago.
Yeah.
And you feel the energy through the boards. They may be different boards, but you know that this space and that space held these experiences and these lives. And, we're kind of most of us are, sentimental,
That's literally the word.
Bunch. I was just showing you Nicki Pennell's shoes in the dressing room, when he died, when we were doing the Scottish play.
And then I went
95.
on Wikipedia and read about him, everything I
Yes.
could.
And his shoes, they gave me his dressing room after that, and his shoes were still there. And I said, we can't move those ever. And they're still there.
Yeah.
Nora Polly glued them. So they're still there because theater is so ephemeral. It isn't, for so long it wasn't filmed. The stories are what carry it, and the memories of a production carry it, because you had to be there.
Yeah.
That's the phrase for live theater.
Yeah.
You had to be there. So we create our own mythologies and our own stories, and because it's a way of saying he, she, they were here. And I think it's important to acknowledge that.
I was so impressed that, I don't know if people know that, but we have labs after a rehearsal that people get to sit and explore the different stages of Stratford and do voice lessons and text lessons. And I was so surprised. It's like actors that were walking in, and I was like, but why is Laura Collins? Why is David? Why are y'all here? But they're here to share.
Yeah.
And that's amazing because you're leaving rehearsal and you're putting your coat on like, okay, let's do another 7 to 8:30 and we're just going to find out more. But you feel like you're doing this to learn something you don't know. And then you realize that, no, you're in a space where you get to share.
Yeah.
You are here to explore and to learn. But
you also are learning something you don't know. Because there's always something you don't know. I mean, and that's another thing that the Stratford Festival has always been big on training. I first came here in '82 as a member of the Shakespeare 3 company, which became the Young Company then, which is now we have the Birmingham Conservatory here. And so training was also very much a part of the theater and bringing in people. There was a Nicki Pennell fund where the company decided, oh, we'd like to work with so-and-so. And you'd have people brought in to do the kind of work you didn't do here.
Like the training is constant.
Well, it is, and it is constant.
And it's beautiful.
And training for an actor, we all know it's constant. You have to keep learning, relearning, questioning things that you've done before, because maybe that's not the best way to do it. Maybe there's other ways, other ways of working. That's exciting because it challenges you, Yeah.
It's just beautiful to see how I did not expect to have access to so many different level of experiences when you show up at a lab. I felt like, oh, it's going to be like the first year and the second year, maybe third season. No.
Well, when we had morning warm-ups before rehearsals began, that's when I saw, senior members of the company. And I was in my early 20s, and there were senior members warming up in the morning before they started rehearsal so that they were ready with their body and their voice to start rehearsing. And they were there, and they were doing the warm-ups and the group warm-ups, which are fabulous because I don't know many other theaters that have group warm-ups, that there's a space made available for you to warm up as a group, which is your introduction to not only getting your body and voice ready, but also just to receiving things from whoever's leading the warm-up, whether it's a voice coach or movement coach, to receive a thing and respond, because that's what you're doing on stage. You have to be open to receiving something new rather than, oh, that's not the way I do my warm-ups. Receive. That's your first step of the evening.
Absolutely.
To receive what's given to you, and then move on. It's important, and it creates company. It creates an ensemble that feels that they're, together in this, and they are together in this. I mean, when you hear actors outside of work or in a bar at a party, I mean, it's like veteran stories. Well, that show, this show, when this happened.
Not to take away from Shakespeare, but I do feel like that is the true secret weapon of Stratford. That community, that tradition, and that belongingness of feeling like you're part of a company that is supporting each other into telling these stories. Yes, Shakespeare stories, but that sense of working together and knowing that when you come back next year, who are the new faces and who are the faces that are still there?
If you come back.
If
you have to remember, we can talk about the family, but sometimes it's like Thanksgiving dinner and there's no placemat for you. So, because we are freelancers,
you
first
have
and
to
foremost.
leave the nest. But it's interesting to know that there's some sort of a circle where you get to come back and feel like, okay, I can continue from where we left off. And that is not, as freelancers, we don't have these spaces a lot.
No, and you are always working with different people across the country, which is also exciting. But it is nice when you work with people you have a certain shorthand.
And to have those not a few weeks, a lot of weeks, but those few months of, exactly, we are each other's community while we're here. Actors even longer who have to stay for after the rehearsal process and present.
They do have to stay after the rehearsal. They have to do the show.
The whole thing. Like, is there... And I think I forget that sometimes as a director. Like you come in, you do the direction and
then you leave.
And then you leave.
It's all in the stage manager's hands.
Yep. We love
heavens
the stage
for them.
Managers. Annie Murphy, we love you.
Yes, absolutely.
Holding on to
Aaron and Caitlin, Annie Murphy. Great team.
And I don't know how much time I have left, but
yes.
I have this theory that great actors make the best directors. how do you feel your journey as an actor is feeding your journey as a director now?
Well, as an actor, for better or worse, I always asked a lot of questions and tried to figure out my function in the play. What story were we collectively telling, and how did I fit in there? And sometimes would ask a director, do you see, this character this way or that way? Because if you see it that way, I don't think I'm the right person, or whatever. So, but that, even as a young person, I did that just because, I felt passionately about the characters or whatever. And so sometimes you wouldn't do plays because you thought, I don't know if I can do that. And it's funny, sometimes it's fun. Like my husband, Miles Potter, is a director, but he started out as an actor. And his first works professionally, I think, were also devised work and collective creations. I started at the Blythe Festival, and it was, best idea wins, and you're improvising shows. And I think that informed my feeling about the collaboration in a room. As an actor and a director, and that there should be collaboration, or at least hearing out people's ideas. I mean, eventually, the director will make a choice and say, I think for this, we need this. I remember, Miles told me, trust your instincts as an actor. He was one of the few directors who told me when I was younger to trust my instincts. I was right out of theater school almost. And I didn't in the early days. I was very, very insecure. And so I think my trust in myself grew as an actor, but it's not always there as a director, I think, because it's because I'm responsible for the whole thing and not just my portion of the wheel, my spoke in the particular wheel that we're rolling along with. But my curiosity about plays, I think, has always been the same. Like, why did they write that? Why did they write that line? Why that word? Especially with Shakespeare. Why that word instead of another one? Because you have to love the language. With Shakespeare, it's through the language. And you have to want to use that to describe most accurately how you feel. Not that, it's so beautiful what I'm saying, but this is how I can describe what I feel for you. The sun, Viola talks about it, that blessed orb. I'm getting it wrong because I try not to learn the lines, but so it's their language is how they connect with people. And it's not that they're devoid of physicality there; it's in their bodies, but it's through the language that they communicate, even non-verbally. When they say "oh," it's an "oh." Is it a sigh? Is it a oh? Or is it a oh?
I wrote that note somewhere.
Did you?
I wrote that note somewhere because it happened in rehearsal, and a lot of beautiful things happen in rehearsal. But watching you scratch exactly at that script and ask, why are we saying this? And what is the story? And I think I also have a page where I was like, all the if, but, sure, well, and all these different words that are helping you
change thought.
Exactly.
And move forward rather
Your
than,
understanding of the script and of the stories and of the sentence it's mesmerizing to observe. It's really interesting. It's beautiful, and it's making me rediscover a sentence over and over and over. And as you said, like the curiosity that you're describing in yourself as an actor, but I see it also as how you direct, and when you approach them in between. Okay, we're going to talk about the scene, and yes, we're going to talk about the mumbling.
The mumbling.
But that's when it happens. Like you approach them, and then you start to question, and then you're going for the thoughts, and that's why I would never go and be behind. Like, let me listen to that whispering, because there's something very beautiful into watching you getting into the conversation, and then your volume gets very, very, very low, very, very low. And then it becomes a very intimate conversation between you and Jessica. And we're like,
I know. It's me trying, I think somehow me trying. And also I am a mumbler. My husband will attest. I am,
But you get very deep into finding the answers into what they're saying. And then, exactly. And then I just sit back and I observe how we're doing the scene again and guess, I guess
I guess this is maybe
this
what
is what
Shauna
the
said.
mumbling was happening.
Maybe was, yes. I guess it's also a way of pulling it down to making it personal and partially private, because I think every actor still has to retain their mystery about their choices. You don't have to tell the reason why you're doing everything
to the whole room,
because you will know. You will have some thought or some image that will spring forward for you. I don't need to know that. I just need to know that moment is a discovery, or you've found something. And so it's finding for each particular actor the right springboard, the right cue, the best way to communicate what you're trying to say, because you're exchanging your ideas about the character and you're receiving what the actor is giving. You're going, I sense you're uneasy about that, or this part you really like, but you don't like that word. Or why are you saying that word? But it's all the why, not the how with Shakespeare.
Yes.
Not the how. How am I going to do this? Or how am I going to say this? It's about why are you saying this? Why do you need to say it right now? And also, Shakespeare, they used to say you went to hear a play. You didn't go to see a play. You went to hear a play because the stimulation is actually audio.
Absolutely.
Because Shakespeare is poetry, especially when it's in verse, it's poetry. So there are as many things poetical things that you have to be aware of, like the rhythm, like the change of rhythm, because that's visceral. We respond to percussion in a different way. The rhythm changes. We go, what's happening? So you have to not pretend it isn't there. If you're going to sound like you're speaking it natural, you have to be a bit unnatural in your examination of it.
Yeah.
So that you can sound like a real person. But some phrases you can't say, like, I'm washing the dishes, because it's not expressed that way. It's lyrical. There's a lyrical language, and it actually raises the bar. It goes towards music. The language, the next phase would be singing, music. And we know what Shakespeare thought about music, that it was the great healer, and that if you weren't moved by music, don't trust that person.
Do you have any closing remarks?
Yes, come see the play. So my closing remarks are, I don't have any closing remarks because it's
not over, really.
Because it's not over till it's over.
It's not over.
It's going to keep changing, this play. So if you've seen it once, come see it again. It will be different.
Absolutely. And actually, that's definitely something that's people, if you have access to Stratford stages more than once, see it, give it a few weeks, and see it again. Oh, my God. Absolutely.
I'm going to pop in occasionally.
Yeah, you have a privilege of being here all the time. I'll pop back in September, and I get to see it again. I have other shows that I also have to see when I come back in September.
Yes.
But I want to check out how it evolved from June to September. We can
go together.
We should.
And take notes.
Okay, now. Surprise notes after the show.
Oh, Could
you imagine? I am telling everybody for the rest of my life. I work with Seana McKenna. Yes, I was. That year when I work with Seana McKenna, I'm going to drop that name so many times. It's lovely. It's amazing. Your brain is fantastic. And you're so funny. You're very funny.
What's she talking about?
Very funny. You have a sense of humor that works. I'm a lucky
I think
person.
you have to in this business, don't you?
Yeah, it must be hard. It must be hard to not have a sense of humor in this industry.
That would be crushing.
The thing about Hedda is she does all these things that I think secretly as a woman, I kind of would love to do, but I would never dare to.
What kind of things?
Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh no. Sort of. But you know what I mean? Like, she says things that you wouldn't even dare to say.